So we're going to talk about two different topics, two very different topics in some ways today. The morning is all about dog dog reactivity. We get to reinforce ourselves in the afternoon by talking about play. So let's just start right off by talking about dog dog reactivity. I'm going to focus mostly on dogs who are on leash. This morning I'm talking about the kind of dog, we all know them, some of us have had them, who you're out walking, you're at the vet clinic, you're at the park, you're at dog training, you're in your neighborhood, your dog sees another dog, and either it's bar, rar, 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 or it's some version thereof, or sort of working its way up to. It's the dog who makes walking not fun, the dog who humiliates you, right? You know, and ironically, it's, I think, becoming increasingly common. So let's start with classical counter conditioning, and then I'm going to spend very little time on that, but I'm also going to talk about, we're going to demonstrate operant counter conditioning using positive reinforcement. Operant counter conditioning using positive reinforcement. And so we'll demonstrate with some dogs. We're going to demonstrate an auto watch. We're going to demonstrate where's the dog. Before I get into all of those methods, there are a couple things I want to say about them in general that apply to every one of them to different degrees. And one is that if you do an overview of them, which I've just done relatively lately, in the last couple of months, if you do an overview of all these different methods, which at first blush, some of them seem exactly opposite of each other. You know, teach the dog to look away from the dog, teach the dog to look at a dog. Don't teach the dog anything, let the dog teach itself. I mean, they seem so different, but I was looking at them and I had one of those moments that's like the Gary Larson cartoon where the cows are eating grass, they're all grazing away, and all of a sudden one cow jerks her head up like this and goes, "This is grass. We've been eating grass." So my cow-like aha moment was, we're all doing the same thing in a functional way, in that most of these methods, all of these methods, the ones that I use the most and the ones that are sort of hot right now, all of the methods in some way decrease the confrontation between two dogs. They basically start with two dogs like this, with the potential of two dogs like this, and then they diffuse that. In some way, you decrease that confrontation, you increase the distance between the dogs, and the dog is reinforced for what we would consider to be an appropriate behavior. What we're going to do next is we're going to, again, do an operant conditioning procedure. We're going to use positive reinforcement, and again, we're going to have a behavior on cue. This behavior is the opposite, superficially, of auto watch, because this behavior is look at the dog on cue. I just call it where's the dog. Control and Leash talks about this method. I used it with Willie. I'll just tell you my progression, which is Willie was so bad when he'd smell the urine of another dog, he would react. So I started by teaching him, and he was just lost in it. He was just lost in it. So I started teaching him a watch in that context, turned it into an auto watch when he saw other dogs, but I found it really useful also. Once I got him to the point where he was manageable in terms of his own arousal level, I found it really useful to be able to ask him to look at the other dog. And I've used that with a lot of clients' dogs. You know those dogs who the clients say, or maybe it's your own dog, it's like, he doesn't see the dog yet. He doesn't see the dog. The dog's like right there, right? And the subject dog is sniffing and looking everywhere, but right there. It's like, oh yeah, he knows the dog is there. There's some dogs that are so uncomfortable about another dog that they will not look at them. And that's another case where where's the dog is really helpful. So you just simply ask the dog, look at the other dog on cue. Quickly, I want to talk about, I mentioned there was one use that I'm comfortable with of positive punishment. And it's Trish King's method. No, nobody ever yells. The dog is never jerked. There's nothing that we would call aversive, except it is aversive to the dog. Basically, this is for dogs who are really clingy. Can you say German Shepherds? These are for dogs who are very focused on their owner and actually could work with Skye. It would not, I wouldn't do it with Grendel, wouldn't do it with Yogi, even though they really love their owners. But very dependent, clingy dogs, especially, this works really well with. And basically, the dog is on 2 leashes, a regular leash, a long line. This takes a lot of setup. There's another dog. The dogs are moving towards each other. The owner is holding the regular leash. As a safety device, a trainer, a professional trainer, not a friend, professional trainer is holding the long line as a safety device. Because what's going to happen is if the dog reacts and goes over threshold to this dog approaching, the owner is going to throw the leash such that it lands on the back of the dog, a tactile stimulus, and then she's going to turn and run away. That's why it's called abandonment training. You are on your own. You bark and lunge, I am out of Dodge.